By the way, Darren, I love your shirt. I'm very jealous.
Thank you.
I might need a hot rod
Yes.
shirt. That's amazing.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
it is WrestleMania week. We are at WrestleMania 40. My gosh. It's now, oh, they've changed it to, oh, okay. So some years it's just numbers and some years it's Roman numerals. They're
Right.
smart. They've done it because it's XL. They've 40
Hmm.
is XL, so they've done it's WrestleMania extra large. That's cute in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has done nothing to deserve a WrestleMania. There should be a WrestleMania in Pittsburgh. But anyway, um, let's start at the beginning. First WrestleMania, March 31st, 1985. And from what I understand, that like Vince McMahon basically put his entire he basically gambled everything on this
Hmm.
event working.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. He sunk
uh,
everything into it. And I'll never forget this because the Super Bowl started in '66, I think. So my memory, born in the '70s, my first Super Bowl memory I could honestly tell you I remember was probably early '80s. So by then you're into like 10 or 11 Super Bowls. I remember WrestleMania one because we went to the Hickory theater. There was three theaters at the time, and they had it on closed circuit. And you watched it in a movie theater, and I mean, it was neat. It was like we're going to the movie theater to watch wrestling, and but it just here we go, And I mean, it was so smart because that showed him that he could do pay per view, which is when WrestleMania 2 came out, which was held in three different locations: Chicago, New York, and LA. He could do pay per view circuit. So I mean, he was so. I know Vince is going through whatever he's going through right now, but the vision that he had, um, and he pissed off a lot of people along the way. Let's be honest, we can get that to another podcast someday. We could do our a list of people Vince McMahon has pissed off or ruined their lives, but his vision for WrestleMania still stands still, and I can pretty much remember every single WrestleMania. I've watched every single WrestleMania. Um, yeah, and number one, and how he was able to bring in the pop culture immediately.
Mhm.
Brings in Cyndi Lauper, takes Captain Lou, puts her in a Cyndi Lauper video with the Goonies, which is a huge movie that summer, right? And she gets to advertise the Goonies. You have Cyndi Lauper. You had like all these other people just running around, and it just took off. And it's been ever since then that pageantry and the pop culture mix, and that's where the rock and wrestling came along, right? You hit right off. You have Hogan. He goes and the rock and wrestling cartoon, and it was just so '80s with Mr. T. And I remember, and I don't know if a lot of people do this because it's hard to find, but there is video. Like Piper and Orndorff went to the set of the A Team and started pissing off Mr. T and the guys, and Steven Belisario was actually pissed. He had no idea they were going to do this, so they go and they take Mr. T, like he had one of those director's chairs, with his name on it, and Orndorff rips it in half, and like he got ticked, and now like there's like guys holding Mr. T back from Piper and Orndorff. I mean, it was so
Oh my
brilliant.
goodness. I never saw that. That's
Oh
cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great, and here you are. Here we are in 2024, talking about 40 years later.
Dave, do you remember
Yeah.
the very first one?
I do, but for a different reason. Because the video feed to the Civic Arena broke down.
Yes. Yes.
So they had to show it because so I remember and it was like middle of the day. This was not at starting 7 o'clock at night like current.
No.
It started, I think, like 1 in the afternoon from Madison Square Garden. So it was middle of the day, and it was cold because I remember the news coverage of all these very angry Yinzers outside the Civic Arena.
Yeah.
Saying they said the video, I paid this money and the video feeds down and there's nothing they can do. And we're out here, they're already sloshed and they're out there. We're talking mid 80s. So you still have you still had that little bit of the steel worker left over, unlike what you would see today. It's like, so you got these kind of big guys and we're out here and it's cold and we don't know it and there's nothing's going on. And then they said, okay, to make it up, we'll broadcast it on Channel 11.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, it was Quinn and Banana
That like hosted it.
that hosted it.
Wow.
So they did these stupid little things like commercials, and they just broadcast it, and everyone was able to watch it.
Okay, so here's my memory. That's exactly what I remember because I
Mhm.
remember they said, we're very sorry. Yes, the feed went down at the Civic Arena, so we're gonna play it on TV. And I'm like, oh my God, because there was no way I was going to be able to watch it at Civic Arena. So like, oh my God, I get to watch WrestleMania on TV. This is the coolest thing ever. And then my mom says, we're going to Sears and we're having a family portrait. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Now we're having a family portrait? And that portrait, I didn't smile one damn time. I was just so angry that I was missing WrestleMania. And my sister was crying. So it's like my crying little sister and me pouting. And it's a family portrait.
The worst
But
moment
yeah,
in Olin Mills history.
yeah. They were like, yeah, they could.
And I mean, it isn't like you could, and this is like for the younger kids, unless you understood how to set up a VCR and record it at a certain time, which was a major pain back then.
Right.
If it wasn't on TV, you missed it.
You missed it. That's it. Sorry.
There was no replay. They weren't going to show it later unless you got the unless you got the VHS tape, which probably came out like a decade later with because they had to set up a whole nother company for distribution.
Right.
Yeah,
So that didn't come out like that year. You normally had to wait multiple years.
My wife and I often at times explain to my 9-year-old, like, yeah, we had 4 channels. You know, I don't think her and I even got cable until right in that range, like mid to late 80s, right? And like even then it was only 27 channels, you know, but it's so different. But that's the thing about it, you know, David, it's kind of a good point is even though we only had the 4 channels back in the day, wrestling and studio wrestling was still a big part of that.
Oh yeah.
You know, I remember my grandma Steele, who was like Miss Church, like Newer Bible, backwards, forwards, and Latin, whatever. She never missed wrestling. Like, you know, even back to the studio days of Channel 11, which we could get north of the city where we live, is quite a bit north actually. But I mean, it was just she loved Bruno Sammartino. I mean, you know, and I mean the Yinzer connection.
And don't forget, Bruno was in the first WrestleMania.
He was. Yep.
He didn't wrestle. David wrestled.
David Sammartino wrestled.
David, his son, wrestled, but Bruno went to the ring with him.
Okay.
And threw a couple punches, and the crowd went crazy.
Okay. At the time, I believe Bruno was like a backstage like correspondent kind of thing. Yes. I think he was like an interviewer kind of.
Yeah, him and Lord Alfred Hayes were backstage.
Who had a very
schedule with the schedule coming up.
The schedule.
Yes.
So that was WrestleMania 1, and that had huge implications because, you know, we touched on it earlier, but at the time, WWF, Vince McMahon, basically, it used to be, you know, in this 50s, 60s, 70s, it used to be just regional promotions, you know,
right.
AWA, Mid-South, Florida, Georgia, you know, the WWF was in the Northeast, you know, you just had these little things, and then Vince McMahon decides to just take over the whole damn thing and just buy out or take, you know, he took Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant from AWA and you know, all these things, and so yeah, everything was riding on this WrestleMania, and it became huge, but and then WrestleMania 2, not so much. This was the start of the Hulk Hogan defeats the monster of the moment time. I believe the angle was King Kong Bundy, quote unquote, injured Hulk Hogan. And
his ribs were injured.
I think that was on a Saturday night's main event, which was also an awesome. It was awesome on Saturday night main event.
We hopefully will and can do a podcast just on Saturday night.
Oh yeah, there were some really good. There were some really good ones.
There was good stuff, and there was goofy stuff.
Yeah,
there was some like people going down water slides at Hershey Park. I could have sworn I remember that, but it was the Nasty Boys, I swear, going down water slides.
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it was, but I mean, you need that with wrestling,
right?
You need the goofy, happy, funny stuff along with the serious stuff.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, remember WrestleMania 3, you move right into WrestleMania 3, which I wrote down. Joey said write some notes, and there's 2 matches out of WrestleMania 3 that made my top 10. I think I don't have to tell you who they are, but even in that one, you had Hillbilly Jim versus King Kong Bundy, and then the 4 midget wrestlers. I remember in Tokyo. I can't remember the one. I remember like King Kong Bundy squashed to one, like Little Beaver or whatever his name was. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Hillbilly Jim versus King Kong Bundy alone. But yeah, no, and then you're right, Joe. WrestleMania 2 was different because they had it in 3 different cities. That was kind of the catch, and there were some decent matches there. But WrestleMania 3 is where I think it kind of took almost like the ball, right? Like the ball been handed off, it's running pretty well, and you get the brilliant Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant storyline that they did so well to build that up.
Oh my goodness.
And so everyone's looking at that, and then here comes Savage versus Steamboat. And one of my earliest memories, one thing, I was young enough then to realize, okay, I know a little bit's pretty sure it's fake, but I think it's real. You're still at that age. But for Jesse Ventura to kind of break, whatever you want to call it, and says to Gorilla Monsoon, this is the greatest match I have ever seen. And, with excitement in his voice. And it's like they all kind of knew, you knew you were watching the greatest match you'd ever seen. And to me, to this day, it's my favorite match. And so you have Savage and George Animal Steele's there. But then, of course, you have Hogan and Andre the Giant, which I remember in school, like lining, how you line you up, like, okay, we're going to go to the bathroom, we're going to go to the kitchen. And like, we're fighting in line, like, who's going to win, Andre or Hogan or Andre. And like, I mean, it was like Super Bowl Sunday, right? Because that was Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
You had to wait till Monday to come back to school and then brag over who won. But I mean, that is what to me, like, they hand the ball off and then he went, 80 yards for touchdown, and WrestleMania forever was what it is today.
Well,
I'm sorry, Joe.
Go ahead.
If 3 needed to happen because the 3 different locations for 2, I think almost killed WrestleMania.
It didn't work.
Because you figured that if you were at one location live, you just were watching a video screen.
What do you do? Yeah, what are you doing? You don't
literally you're watching a video screen for the other when the other match is happening.
Dumb.
Yeah.
But financially, you had 3 full houses. And back then, remember though, back then Vince got most of the money, not from TV deals, from attendance. That's where the money came from. You got your money from putting butts in seats. Unlike now, where they get, literally $1 billion a year from the Saudis. They get
that's just for one thing, yeah.
You got, they're going to Netflix, and that's
$5 billion or something like that.
Yeah. So they're getting billions of dollars without anyone ever showing up or watching anything, guaranteed. Back then it was, we need to put people's butts in seats. That's why they wrestled 300 nights a year, because you needed to fill up all these places that never you were going to televise.
Now, the cool thing about WrestleMania 2 was they had that battle royal with the football players.
That was awesome.
The fridge was in it.
William Refrigerator Perry,
Bill Fralick,
Russ Francis, Jimbo Covert, Ernie Holmes, which was like a wrestler and a player. A lot of that was very interesting that they had a lot of football players in that. But each venue had 4 matches. That was a really dumb idea. So WrestleMania 2 was a bit of a fumble, and they come up with WrestleMania 3. The Steamboat Savage match is still considered one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Excellent angle. That was the angle where Macho Man, quote unquote, killed Ricky Steamboat. And hey, I'm like 10 at the time. I'm like, oh my God, he's dead. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, he's crushing his larynx with the belt.
He's crushed his larynx with the belt. And it's like, let's go back to Bruno Sammartino, who was outside the locker room, and they're attending to Ricky the String Steamboat. Maybe he'll live, maybe he'll die. And Bruno Sammartino's like, we don't know too many details yet. We don't know too many. And Macho Man comes and he says, "Is he okay?" You think he like he's concerned that he killed the dude, and he's like, "I hope he's dead," or "I hope I killed him," or something like that. And Bruno Sammartino says, "You slime," and he attacks Macho.
Yeah. And then
you slime.
Yep.
Um,
And it just then you get the George Animal Steel started working the angle in there, taking Elizabeth.
yeah.
My little boy, we watched that a couple weeks ago. He loves George Animal Steel because I mean, he's so and I told
I
him
need to
like,
know if he's really a professor. Is he
right?
really?
was.
Is he really?
He was.
He's a teacher. He can speak like 5 languages. He's like Boss Hogg from the Duke of Hazzard. Like no idea, dude. He wore a fat suit and he had an IQ of like 312.
Oh
and
my
like,
god!
all these things that Sorrel Boat could do, and here he is playing his hick, corrupt county sheriff on the Duke's of
So
Hazzard.
no,
Imagine-
he had to hide he was a wrestler. George Steele had to hide he was a wrestler so he wouldn't lose his teaching job.
Sure,
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Because back then, even in the late 80s, it was still protected a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we all understand it's predetermined. I don't like using the fake term. I know too many wrestlers and what they do is not fake, predetermined.
It's scripted, but they're athletes.
Scripted.
When Hacksaw Jim Duggan got caught, I think with drugs or something like that. But
Like,
the worst part of that, he was hanging out with the Iron Sheik. It's like, oh my god, they're enemies. What are they doing hanging out? You just absolutely cannot do that. But yeah, I can't imagine being in George the Animal Steele's class. And he was like, excuse me, Professor Steele, did you grade my paper yet? He's like, I'm sorry, I was battling Macho Man for the Intercontinental title at the time. I'll grade your paper later.
Which Lyle Alzado would later kind of steal, if you remember, and he had that 1-year run sitcom, Learning the Ropes. And he played like a math teacher.
A teacher who was also a wrestler.
A mask so people wouldn't know who he was. But that was George Animal Steel gave him that idea or inspired that. He wrote he talked about that. But yeah, I mean, just like it's funny now to watch my son watch it because the first thing he does, he goes, "Is his tongue really green?" I'm like, "Yep, tongue's green." He's eating turnbuckles.
How delicious was that turnbuckle?
He had the
yes, he really was that hairy.
Yes, that hair.
Yeah, you can't fake that.
Yeah, yep. And so, he's like, "Are people really that hairy?" I'm like, "Well, he was." And I kind of watched myself with that because I was so enamored with that. Right, like here's this guy, strong as an ox, but like dumber than a box of rocks, and and amazing how that campiness, like you said, David, it still worked, still was kind of questionable. Is this real or is this not real? But yeah.
Well, part of that as the wrestlers too, because they were brought up told, because a lot of the wrestlers weren't really smarted up to the business until they had their first match. You listen to a lot of these wrestlers on these podcasts, and a lot of these people started in the 80s. They were in training and they thought, okay, I'm gonna have my first match. And then they get told he's going to win. Like, what do you mean he's going to win? I'm ready. No, it's predetermined, kid. What it is? What?
Right.
So remember, it is heavily.
Remember that 2020 segment.
Oh,
it was that
John
Stossel. Yeah, he did that with was it Dr. David Schultz or something like that? He's
Dr.
like,
Death.
it's Dr. fake, Death. Right? And the guy just smacked the hell out of him. Is this like fake to you, buddy?
Stossel sued them and everything over that.
Oh yeah.
Well,
nothing fake about that part.
Piper on a Dan Mayer show. He got really physical with him, and the guy on HBO. I know his last name's like Mayer, like Mahyr, but
Bill Maher.
Yeah, thank you. And Piper got you don't want to push Roddy Piper too far. I mean, and he got right in his face saying it's not fake.
Do you remember? It's Hulk Hogan and Mr. T were on with on some talk show or something with Richard Belzer, and he put him in a front face lock and knocked him out. Just in a face lock, he knocked the guy out. And that was nothing was fake about that. You protected the business back then. But the Hogan Andre storyline was just perfectly done. Oh my goodness, because Hogan won the title in like what 84, 85 or something like that. He defeated, and he was this
84
superstar.
Sheik.
But his buddy Andre the Giant was always there, and it's like, nobody can beat this guy. Like what no, we all know nobody can actually beat Andre the Giant. He's unstoppable. And then it's just a matter of time. It's like, is Andre gonna get, is Andre gonna decide to go for the title? And it was just perfect because it was the evil Bobby the Brain Heenan that lured him into the evil side.
It was just talk about one of the greatest ever, Bobby the Brain, and how great he was with the Heenan family, and but yeah, I remember that, Joe. That's a good thing you brought that up too with Andre, and they did wrestle a few times before that through AWA and up in Minnesota, but he relied on it. Nobody really knew that, and most people didn't unless they were there, so yeah, here comes this thing with Andre, and the brilliance about that was too, like, the flipping of a guy that everybody loved to the bad guy, and Andre didn't have to say much. But one of the best documentaries, I love all the Dark Side of the Rings and the movie The Wrestler and all that, but the HBO one on Andre the Giant, which is like 2 hours long, and they talk about how we really didn't know if Andre was going to let me pin him until we got there. Like 2 hours before we go, we had no clue if Andre was going to let me do it. And Andre's like, okay, boss. Because, so I actually do have a hard time. Like, my son will say to me, Dad, is this fake? And it's scripted, but a lot of it's not. I mean, they get hurt.
If Andre decided not to, that's not happening. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. And Piper always had that confirmation of the story. And he finally came out with unfortunately, about a year before he died. And he told the whole story on that podcast. Joe Rogan's or whoever it was, but they're in Montreal. Those kids are in the bar with him. They're pissing him off. They're throwing stuff. Finally, one throws a half full beer can, hits him in the head. They run out to the street. They get in a Yugo or a Chevette or whatever it was at that time, and Andre flipped the car.
Oh my God.
And Piper, he flipped the car over with 4 people in it. And it just, so they had to wait to see if Andre was going to actually let Hogan win that night.
Yeah.
And then there was a whole controversy. Did Joey Morella count too fast? And really, if you slow it up, it does really look like
Bobby Heenan was talking about that for like 2 years afterwards. Like, you didn't really pin him. You didn't really pin him. Yeah.
Well, the other thing with the whole build up with the Andre Hogan thing, it was somewhat believable. Because it's like, oh, Andre, you're wonderful. And here comes Hogan. Oh, here's my good friend. Oh, by the way, don't forget about me. And it's like, yeah, I can see where someone would get.
Right. A totally believable angle. A totally believable. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm tired of being just like some nice attraction. Maybe I want to be champion, and maybe, maybe I want all the notoriety and stuff. So yeah,
maybe this guy is a giant egomaniac who tries to put himself over everyone else. And we found out after a little later, yes, he was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hogan really was like that. Yes, he was.
I also remember Jesse the Body Ventura, who was the heel commentator, and he was just kind of like trying to just mess with them, just stir it up with those guys. And then he took it too far. He's like, I'm sorry. So that was he had a good part in that too. So yeah, that was WrestleMania 3, just knocked it out of the park. I think that's what cemented it as the premier event. WrestleMania 4. Now WrestleMania 4 was when the tournament, which is I believe Macho Man held the record for like most wins in one night, because I don't think they've ever done a tournament ever since, and he won like 4 or 5 matches.
Because everybody, the other bracket, Andre and Hogan got into it, and
I think they disqualified each other.
Second round, disqualified another. So Savage had to go through the one-man gang. He had to go through Bam Bam Bigelow. He had to go through DiBiase and then up to DiBiase. Or no, there may have been some.
DiBiase was the main events. Yeah,
I think it was a Natural Butch Reed that Savage had to fight. So he had to go through 4 guys. And then you get to Ted DiBiase. He's just another guy who probably could have held a title. If it wasn't for everybody else in there at that time, because he was a great technical wrestler.
Oh yeah.
Great bad guy, and he would be for so many years to come. And working with a local guy like Virgil and stuff, who unfortunately we just lost. But yeah, Ted DiBiase was fantastic, and he played a great villain. So that tournament was good. I that's the one where the tournament was so long and so good. I kind of forget about some of the other matches that took place at WrestleMania 4. But yeah, I mean, it's the only one that's really been the tournament, and it was so great. And I know you hear these podcasts like you're saying, Dave, and a lot of people would love to see another tournament. I think it'd be kind of fun if they did a tournament.
Basically, almost all of WrestleMania was that tournament.
Yep.
That was basically the entire WrestleMania. Um, there was an Ultimate Warrior match. There was an Intercontinental Brutus Beefcake defeated the Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Championship. I don't remember that. Oh,
Yeah.
but it was by disqualification. But
disqualification.
yeah, basically
okay.
the entire, and there was the Demolition versus Strike Force was for the tag team championship. But basically that was the entire card was that tournament, which is I mean it should be. I mean it was like so many matches. So
Or world title,
yeah. In the pop culture, right? You had a famous scene where Andre puts his hands around Bob Uecker's neck, and like Bob Uecker's upper body disappears. You know, and like Vanna White, I think, was the guest ring and the bell ringer for the main event or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you got to remember, we're still in the mid '80s, mid to late '80s, and Vanna White's huge.
Yeah,
I mean, she's you know, yeah.
And then WrestleMania 5, the Mega Powers explode. Hogan and Macho Man. Oh man, that was another amazing angle. The Mega Powers,
which a large of it, like you said, developed through Saturday Night Main Event throughout that next year. And it was so terrific, and Savage and Hogan did that so well, And I think Hogan has talked a few times. I saw him at Tampa at his shop, and he was talking to fans, like he'll do the fan talk. He was talking how that's when some people started buying into he was a little bit of a showboat. Like he really was jealous of Savage's, thing. And so that's when he said he felt like there was the first times I started hearing boos. Like they were listening to Jesse's body. Maybe I am a showboat, maybe I am jealous, and so it was kind of fun.
He had lust in his heart, brother. He had love that. Apparently in real life there were some things going on between Hogan and Savage and Ms. Elizabeth. So
Yep.
You lust in your heart. Yeah. Oh man, I got it.
You figure also Hogan was on top for what at that point 5 years, almost 6.
Yeah.
84 to 89.
Basically,
88.
Yeah. So at that point, fans were getting they fans back didn't turn as quickly as they do now. Where you see the current product now, people are like, "Oh, Becky Lynch, she's old news," so they're not having big reactions to her. It's like
it got old. It's like
but even back then, after so many years, it was like, "Oh yeah, him."
Right. It's like, okay, you defeated the monster. Oh, you defeated this other monster. Or you defeated this. Like it kind of got old with Hogan, and and then you had Macho Man versus Hogan at WrestleMania 5, but then WrestleMania 6 was kind of a passing of the torch. Ultimate Warrior versus Hogan. Ultimate Warrior was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and you thought, "Oh, this is a passing of the torch." Hogan loses. Like I think that was the first WrestleMania Hogan ever lost, if you don't count that disqualification thing with Andre in the tournament.
Right. Yeah, like what they call like an actual count out loss, and they built that up fun too. The Warrior does a squash match against Honky Tonk in SummerSlam. Beats the piss out of him in like 40 seconds, gets the Intercontinental title, and he was on his way. The former Dingo Warrior, and there he goes, and he rides into WrestleMania with all that popularity, and that was probably since WrestleMania 3, you really weren't sure. I mean, were they really going to let Hogan lose, or are they going to feed him the popularity of this newer kid? And lo and behold, it's like, nope, we're riding with the Warrior.
Go with the hot hand.
A great side Intercontinental bracket tournament of its own after he had to relinquish the Intercontinental title, That was won by Mr. Perfect, which was great, and with Tito Santana was in the
Wow.
final with that one. But yeah, that was a good WrestleMania too with those two. Yeah.
And then you had a bit of a lull in the early 90s. Things kind of WWF kind of got a little just, not so good.
Hey, Joe, before you move on from 6, though, it was in Toronto. And I'm bringing I don't,
Yes.
my memory is not as good as Darren's.
It
So I'm bringing up some of this
was.
information while we're talking about it. And in attendance was a young Edge and Christian.
No way.
Yeah, I'm just reading it off the wiki here. So yeah, I remember Edge talking about it, as were
1990.
Lance Storm and Renee Paquette.
Wow. How cool
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, like, I think Edge and Christian had decent season. You can see them a couple times clearly. Yeah, and then you didn't realize it until then, but like Canadians love wrestling, and which obviously came back to when you had one of the other great ones, WrestleMania 18, when you had Hogan versus The Rock, probably one of my top 10 favorite matches. And it was Skydome was arguably the loudest of any of the WrestleManias ever when those two went at it. So yeah, Skydome was fantastic, and that match. And you're right, Joe. I think there's a lull too. You get in these next matches. I do remember it was a WrestleMania 7 where it was Savage versus the Warrior. That was a really good match because that was the whole storyline. Because you had the Persian Gulf War, and they're like, okay, the Warrior's just not as patriotic, so we got to have him lose the title to Sergeant Slaughter, who now is a bad guy. And he talked, and Sergeant Slaughter to this day, like if you see him at Comic-Con or any of them, and I've met him with there, and he talks about how he hated doing that.
Yeah.
That really bothered him.
Yeah.
Switch to that. And then they bring the Iron Sheik back as girl and stuff, and so then they're like, well, obviously.
Who switched countries? Iron Sheik switched from Iranian to an Iraq, which is like the most unheard of thing ever. It's like they hate each other.
They hate each other. So I'm gonna go over there. And then of course we gotta have Hulk Hogan and the Real American and everything, and Derringer, which I believe, David, we were talking about music earlier. I think Real American was actually intended for the Rock and Roll Express.
No, it was intended for
music.
It was intended for Mike Rotundo and
the Can-Am Express.
No, it was Mike Rotundo and some other thing. It was
Okay,
but yeah, it was intended for somebody else.
Was it Mike Rotundo and Barry Windham?
Rotundo and Barry Windham,
who are going into the Hall of Fame this year?
Yes.
Wow. And and it got switched for some reason. It got switched to Hulk Hogan. And I mean,
I hate to say it, just guessing. I'm guessing Hogan heard it and said,
"I want that,
brother. I want that music, brother. It's so good, brother."
The famous Hogan quote behind the scenes: "That doesn't work for me, brother." He took that song and said, "That does work for me, brother."
Right.
That was the main event. Was Hulk Hogan defeated Sergeant Slaughter at WrestleMania 7.
And you know what? Refreshing my memory on 7, it was supposed to be in the LA Coliseum.
Yep.
They moved it to the Memorial Sports Arena.
Why?
For security reasons because of the Gulf War.
Most likely it was because they didn't sell enough tickets.
Saddam Hussein was sitting there like, if we could just take out WrestleMania 7, we might, they'll forget about, everything else over here.
And by March in 91, I was a freshman in college. All we watched was Gulf War.
Right.
Because
that dominated. That's all we were.
You got a bunch of 18-year-olds. You got a bunch of 18-year-olds, right? Trying to figure out the draft rules because we were told Saddam Hussein had the 4th largest army in the world, and this is going to be a long, drawn-out battle. And they have it. Iraq is the most heavily fortified city in the world with the aircraft, with the anti-aircraft guns and everything else. And everyone's looking into it, and you figure at that point the two last military things was Panama and Grenada,
right,
so,
which were tiny, and
then you're going back to Vietnam. So
and
18-year-olds
we saw all of the war on TV on CNN. This was another thing. Is like this war was televised.
Yeah, we were watching in our dorm, and we're like,
yeah. So
literally,
yeah,
are
we
we
were
going to get
scared.
drafted or not? So we're scared.
Whether you
And
like
this was March, so it was done.
whether
Pretty
you
much.
whether you like the storyline or not, again, to Vince McMahon's credit, he took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
and,
Right.
You know, here
Makes
you had
total
Hogan
sense.
versus So I mean, they had some fun with it there, but still, it was a little campy. And then I would say in the next year in WrestleMania 8, like I said, I kind of pre-read some down, and Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental title.
That was excellent.
Probably one of the top 5 matches in the history of WrestleMania.
Now, was that one of the ones where they had or am I thinking of a different one? Was that all in the ring, or did they do some things like outside of the ring? I might be confusing that with Piper versus Goldust.
That was Piper versus
Goldust. Piper Goldust was completely out the ring.
Okay,
yeah, it was out the ring. It was nuts.
Still, it was an excellent match for the Intercontinental Championship, and Bret Hart won. That was the start of the Bret Hart, him becoming a great single star.
Mm-hmm.
And the main event was not for the WWF title. I believe that this is the year that Ric Flair came into the WWF, won the title at Royal Rumble, and Randy Savage actually defeated Ric Flair for the title at WrestleMania. But that was not the main event. The main event, we had to have Hogan in the main event. That was Hogan defeated Sid Justice.
Yes, for a non-title match.
Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm. I was thinking something else, but you're right. That was because it was. I'm trying to think of which WrestleMania it was where the main event was. I just held up Bam Bam Bigelow versus Lawrence Taylor, which was probably one of the worst WrestleManias ever, and the worst.
Ooh,
yeah, that was awful.
But you know what?
I stand corrected, Joe. You were right. I forgot about Sid Justice.
Oh, but so much credit for Bam Bam carrying LT.
Oh God, yeah.
And there's someone else that should have had just a minute with the title.
Yes.
Bigelow.
Yeah. He had
a transition. As a transition.
He never got his due. And that was an amazing talent. A big guy that could fly like that.
Mm-hmm.
And had the look. Yeah. I mean, he's just one hell of an action figure, but yeah, he was an amazing, but that's I mean, you could list so many wrestlers. It's Junkyard Dog could have been a champion. Ted DiBiase. There's so many could have been a champion at the time. Roddy Piper could have been a champion. Yeah.
Should have. Yeah. But again, Vince, unfortunately, he got hot, 84 with Hogan, 85 with Hogan. And he could never move on from Hogan.
Yeah.
No, and that's where you're running into here with WrestleMania 9, 10, and it just got where you had Bret Hart and Yokozuna in a great match.
And then Hogan comes in at the end. Well. Oh my God.
They told Bret Hart about 20 minutes before that match how it was going to end. Bret Hart's like, what?
You gotta be kidding me.
And so, and then to Bret Hart's credit, he played that up very well. Go in there, go get him, and the Fuji dust is everywhere.
Yeah.
And speaking of Mr. Fuji, your medal reminded me of this. Remember WrestleMania 4? We were talking a little bit as we started this podcast about the pageantry and all they had, and they had a marathon outside of WrestleMania 4. And Mr. Fuji won the marathon because, remember, he starts out, and he's in his tuxedo and the hat and the cane, and he's going. And then they have a sky camera up at the finish line. Here he comes out of the alleyway, ahead of the real marathon runners, mind you, and crosses the finish line and runs it. Lord Alfred Hayes is losing his mind. And Mr. Fuji won the WrestleMania marathon.
I'm going to try that at the next marathon. I'm going to try to just sneak in at the end for that. And win the marathon. And I'll wear a tuxedo too.
Yes. But Mr. Fuji with the Fuji dust, and then I forget the story behind Hogan's black eye because he had the black eye. He was beat up or something, and then so he goes in there and he, the leg drop and he pins Yokozuna and there was yays, but there were some boos because the smart wrestling fan. I think that's what all of us have kind of become that grew up with this.
Right.
we kind of
Right.
were like, what David just hit the nail on the head with was, okay, you rode Hogan, but we're going on 10 years and we're kind of ready for the next guy. And that was Bret Hart. And you're throwing Hogan in our face.
Yeah.
And Hogan, he didn't want to lose it. Hogan was all for it, obviously. But we, as fans, we were ready for the next guy.
Well, one other thing, that this is something that, again, jogging my memory. This WrestleMania, the announcers wore togas because it was a Caesar Palace.
Caesar Palace.
And that was the introduction of Jim Ross.
It was Jim Ross in a toga. No cowboy hat, obviously, because he didn't wear one at the time.
And I think he was embarrassed as hell as wearing a damn toga.
Yes. And also, you want to talk about the worst matches in WrestleMania history.
Oh, Giant Gonzalez
versus Undertaker.
My God.
I mean, like, you figure, and that's such an enigma, and what a great point, David, because for the most part, whoever did costumes, and I know Vince oversaw a lot of it, they pretty much nailed most of the characters. Some were campy, like I always think of Barry Darso ended up as the
Repo Man?
Demolition, but he ended up as Repo Man.
Yeah.
And the Goon and some of those crazy, awful guys in the 90s. But who thought to put almost a 7'10" guy in a hair body, like one of those things you'd see on,
it
like,
was bad.
Special with the organs and like the anus and the
It was
furry.
so dumb.
What the fuck? I mean, you could have put him in like all black, or just go get the best seamstress, pay her or him overtime, and give him a badass long leather coat or something. Anything.
You instantly killed him right there just with that costume.
Yeah, wife beater and jeans, something.
Now, the guy, he was 7'10", but he couldn't walk. He couldn't speak well. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for the guy because someone should have told him no. But I remember hearing a story. He did it to pay for his family back home.
Yeah.
So all the money went back home. So it was like, I need money to send. This is the easiest way for me to make money.
Yeah.
And so it's just... But yeah, that was so bad.
And that was when, because I put that down as a memory too, Joe, the Taker streak. So I think the streak started to WrestleMania 9 where he beat Snuka.
Yeah.
And then Giant Gonzalez was 10. But it was, yeah. Poor Jimmy Snuka was way past his prime in that one. And then they kept bringing, for the same reason, David, like a lot of these guys, they were coming back to feed their families. And Jimmy Snuka, he was way past his prime.
Yeah.
But yeah.
WrestleMania 10 was exceptional for a couple matches. Now wait, okay, so Bret Hart actually wrestled twice.
He wrestled Owen.
He wrestled Owen in the beginning, which was one of the great matches, and you knew it was, brother against brother, and they're two very good wrestlers. You knew they were gonna knock it out, and they did. And then he defeated Yokozuna, but also on that match was was it the first ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship?
I believe so.
I believe that was the very first ladder match with Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels.
At least in WrestleMania. I can't remember if they may have wrestled In Your House, because that was a pay-per-view that started popping up then, the In Your House pay-per-views. Remember the very first one where like somebody actually won a house?
Won a house.
They won a house. Yeah. Which, I mean, it's still that mix of Barnum and Bailey and wrestling. And so, but yeah, I mean, 10 did have a lot of that Owen and Hart in it. And then you had, of course, as you're saying there, but then Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon, it's arguably one of the greatest matches in history. Just fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Which got into WrestleMania 11 with the horrible Lawrence Taylor, Bam Bam Bigelow. And then it was funny, as much as Vince loved big guys, he always wanted the big, tall, big muscle. Diesel was the main event in WrestleMania 11 with Shawn Michaels, right? And Diesel retains the title. And Diesel is as big and as powerful and as impressive he was. Nobody just got. I don't know. He just didn't identify with the.
It just didn't work. It just didn't work. That was
like meh. But then when he goes into the out, then they go to leave the out and be the outsiders. Then of course it works. And He was a much better bad guy and showed off his wrestling.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it was just like, just Diesel was the only thing we could come up with. And I always love how, like, when they came back to WWF and The Rock's like, "Oh, Big Daddy Cool, me," he's making fun of him. And, like, I mean, because The Rock just did that kind of shit and stuff. Sorry.
Yeah.
And, but that just, WrestleMania 11 is probably one of the worst.
Yeah, and the WrestleMania 11 Diesel, who was accompanied by Pamela Anderson, defeated Shawn Michaels for the WWF title, who was accompanied by Jenny McCarthy.
Well, of course. So yeah,
and Diesel left with both women.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He's like, "Oh, I'm a winner. I got both women."
Yeah.
And the scary thing is, if you look at the attendance from these earlier manias, they were not that big.
16 grand, 19
Yeah,
grand.
16 grand at the Hartford Civic Center.
Yeah.
You ever guys
I'm thinking at that point, that's to save money.
It was a low time. It was not the greatest time in WWF's history. It was it was definitely a lull until the mid 90s and the whole Attitude Era and the whole NWO thing happened, and that which exploded. But right before that was WrestleMania 12, which was the Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels 60-minute Iron Man match,
which was incredible.
It was incredible, but it annoyed me because isn't the point of the Iron Man match that, like, it's just you go the whole time limit and it's like whoever has the most pinfalls. But in this one there was no pinfalls. They just went and they actually went to overtime or whatever that it is. But yeah, excellent match. I mean, just two of the best to ever do it. And
but then again, there's some intermingled. That was the WrestleMania where they had the Huckster versus Nacho Man, and that guy
really,
which was just stupid. That's when WCW starting to hit back. Hit legs, and they start hitting back with that. That was the Piper Goldust Street match was in that one too, which was bizarre but cool. And Goldust really kind of took off with that, and and that was Stone Cold Steve Austin before he became Stone Cold. He was still the Taskmaster or whatever he was then.
Oh yeah.
It's funny with these guys because, like, we can say, well, this one was not as good, this was good, but every single one of them had their own panache or just funny thing about them that just made them quirky or cool.
This was the low point of WWF because at the time, because the NWO angle just started in WCW, and WCW was the hottest damn thing. Everybody was paying attention to that and the NWO, and it was hot as hell. This was 96, and WWF had not started to do their counterattack yet. Their only counterattack is we'll have the Huckster versus Nacho Man with Billionaire Ted and all that stupid stuff. And Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, they did what they could, but something needed change, and boy did it. We get to WrestleMania 13, and the main event was Psycho Sid versus The Undertaker, but for the WWF title. But really, the big match was Bret Hart's defeating Stone Cold Steve Austin. This was the beginning of Stone Cold Steve Austin just being launched into the stratosphere. He lost, but the way he lost, by passing out, blood spurting out of his head. And that was, remember, Stone Cold was the bad guy, Bret Hart was the face, and they did a double face turn at the end.
They did a doubles turn at the end, yeah.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. At this time, The Rock was still Rocky Maivia.
Yep.
Bless his heart.
The screamers and the No, I think David hit on that earlier too when he was talking about, Andre, kind of going from one versus the other, but that kind of picked up from there with Bret Hart being a hero, and he goes into it and, like, I don't think anything's really ever like that ever happened since. Like, here's this guy everybody liked, and somehow during the course of that match, like Rocky IV, right? Like, they're cheering for him, and like they're cheering for Stone Cold Steve Austin, and like you said, Joe, that was perfect. The stratosphere,
but like it's a time wise too. it was perfect
Mhm.
for the anti-hero.
Yeah.
Bret Hart could not play an anti-hero.
No.
He
He's horrible.
was literally what we now think of John Cena.
Right.
Yeah, just
You
white meat
know,
baby face. Yeah,
I'm going to do the right thing and just do 100% the right thing. And, I'm going to stick up for what's right. And Austin was like, boink.
yeah, yeah. He was
Yep.
all just a big fu about everything,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
and Bret Hart couldn't take it anymore. And just Bret Hart through the Attitude Era was just if not the MVP, pretty damn close with everything that
Yeah.
happened.
I
Um,
do think I always feel like Psycho Sid was a guy that as another one too that little underrated because I really enjoyed. I thought he was actually great in front of the camera. He was good with that. He was fantastic in the ring. And he was everything you wanted him. He's huge,
Oh, yeah.
muscular, fairly athletic. He was horrible off the ropes, which unfortunately, if you ever saw that awful injury,
Yeah.
he goes back to WCW and he tried to add that into his repertoire, and he jumps off top rope and basically shatters his femur and everything through his leg. I mean, he just
oh my
falls
God.
on the middle of the ring at a live event, and but that was actually probably a much better match than I think people give it credit for. I mean, he was a very good athlete. Had the body glove, arm sleeve kind of a thing going, and but that was a better main event than what I think he gets credit
The,
for now.
the thing about Sid was when he first came to WWF as Sid Justice,
Yes.
people loved him. And
Mhm.
that was the thing where he was in the same thing with Hogan or something
Okay.
like that, and people were actually booing Hogan, and Hogan's like, "Oh, I don't like this," and he basically said, "You need to make him a bad guy because people were liking Sid Justice too much." So that was a shame that I mean, in the end, the guy wasn't the greatest of guys anyway, but still, that really
Right.
sucked that Hogan basically just squashed that guy's push because, oh gosh, people were cheering for him and not me. Like, oh, so
Yep.
frustrating. But then we get to now we're in the middle of the Attitude Era, the middle of the heat of the Monday Night Wars, 1998. I mean, imagine, Raw gets like what 2 million now or something like that, and people lose their
Mhm.
minds. Both shows were getting like 10 million on Monday Night Wars. It was
Mhm.
amazing. It was like the height of wrestling, and you have the WrestleMania 14 with Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF champion, with Mike Tyson as a
Yeah.
special outside enforcer. Oh my God, getting Mike Tyson basically was like one of the main battles of the Monday Night Wars, was getting Mike Tyson.
Oh, yeah.
That was so huge at the time. He was still lightning huge. And that was just such a perfect angle with Stone Cold. I remember they brought in Mike Tyson, and Vince McMahon like told Stone Cold, was like, "You behave, now you behave." And then Stone Cold just gave him the finger and wanted to fight him. It was just like the biggest
Well,
thing ever.
yeah, because the angle on that was he was with Shawn Michaels, right? He came
Right.
Mhm.
out the neck,
Yeah.
and then of course you know what happens. He knocks the crap out of Michaels, and before Shawn Michaels goes, but I thought you were on our side, and then Hunter
Tears off the
Hunter
shirt.
Helmsley's like Triple H kind of gets into play, and that born that, and Triple H is done with Shawn Michaels and his crap, and yeah, it was an amazing storyline. It was a lot of fun, and I remember WCW countering with Dennis Rodman. And the fun thing
Yeah.
about that storyline was Dennis Rodman. They were like in the middle of the
Of the
of the NBA
NBA
finals,
finals.
and he goes and he's on like Bash at the Beach or whatever it was or something Starcade, and like he didn't play too well. That's because he's out wrestling Diamond Dallas Page or
We,
whatever.
we
Mhm.
didn't know whether he was going to show up to the game because he's
Yeah.
with Hollywood Hogan defeating, Sting and Lex Luger or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I like so, but yeah, Tyson was obviously a little bit of a bigger name draw there for a little bit. I mean, Rodman was still big, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a great match. There was besides that, you had Kane was a thing at the time. Undertaker defeated Kane. Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, who's Ted Funk,
But Joe, I
defeated the
think
New Age Outlaws.
if I'm not mistaken, that was Shawn Michaels got hurt so bad in that Royal Rumble match with the Undertaker that I don't think he wrestled again in WWE until 02
Right.
or 03. I mean,
02.
that was a
He was hurt
final
really
hurrah
bad.
for Shawn Michaels for a long time.
This is when Shawn lost his smile in
Right.
storyline.
Oh my goodness.
And because he was,
that
like I said, he was
crazy.
physically just so beat up that it was like, and the funny thing is, hold on, let's gotta check this out real quick. How old was Shawn when Shawn was born in 65? So
He would have been 33.
33, which
Yeah.
look at now, admittedly, they take a hell of a lot better shape they do, because now instead of going out after wrestling and doing whatever drugs and a whole bunch of alcohol and doing whatever else, which may not be legal, they're playing video games and they're doing TikToks and
Well, they're
YouTube.
also not wrestling 300 times,
Right.
300 days a year.
Right.
Their their
Right,
schedule is a
14
lot
days off,
easier.
4 days on.
Right.
Yeah,
But if you
14
look
days
at
on, 4 days off.
the top people right now at WrestleMania, Cody's in his late 30s, Roman's in his late 30s.
Oh yeah,
Drew McIntyre, he looks like a Greek god.
Yeah.
He's in his late 30s.
Yeah. That mid late 30s is like a prime years for a wrestler. It's terrible if you're a right winger for the Penguins, but if it's the prime years for a wrestler.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
so Shawn Michaels going out at age 33 was huge, and he was like the top. I mean, he was just the WrestleMania main event, and that basically knocked him out for almost 10 years. Yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was sad. But yeah, and then WrestleMania 15, you had. This is when The Rock was the thing. The main event was Stone Cold against The Rock for the WWF Championship.
And that was in Philadelphia too.
Well,
I remember that one, Joe. I wrote that down as a memory. Because not only was it Rock versus Austin, which was just so great. I mean, I think that's really what put them over WCW. WCW was close. The NWO was arguably one of the greatest storylines in the history of professional wrestling. But Austin and The Rock together were so good that they just trumped everything. And here they are in the main event. And that's when JR, he came out because he wasn't going to do that. And he talked about this in his book. And he had that Bell's palsy that hit him. And he was, I'm not doing it. Vince asked him like 10 times, I'm not doing it. And The Rock and Austin said, we're basically not doing this unless you call the match. So before that, so here comes JR down the ramp. They play the Boomer Schooner, and he comes down and he calls that match, and he came back, and that really brought the second part of his career back. But I put that down as a memory because that was a very cool memory. And of course, it was the Stone Cold and The Rock. I mean, it was, how could you beat it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you had kind of a changing of the guard in 2000. Now, at this point, the Monday Night Wars are over. I don't even know if WCW did WCW die in 2000 or 2001? I don't remember.
It kind of was clinging to life in the early 2000s.
It was not good.
Repair.
But you had the main event was Triple H defeated The Rock. Wait a minute.
No,
wait, did we miss?
It was a 4-way fatal match
with Mick Foley and Big Show.
It was after Mick's retirement.
Right.
It was after Mick's retirement, and they brought Mick back with a haircut that he got a pop for. And each McMahon had a wrestler.
Okay.
Linda had Mick. Vince had Rock. Steph had Triple H,
and Big Show was with
Shane
O'Mac. Yeah. So the also in that WrestleMania 2000, Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle for the two fall triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship and European Championship, and also Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boys versus the Hardy Boys in a triangle ladder match for the tag team championship. I believe that was the first time they did one of those you
I
just
mean, yeah.
one of those epic matches or something. So changing of the guard, yeah, and then
But
wrestle.
let's ask them. If you would have said in 2000, 24 years later, both Hardy still wrestling, Edge and Christian still wrestling, Edge being a champion.
Yeah.
Okay. Edge is a champion. Bubba Ray still wrestles in TNA.
Yeah, yeah.
Devon does occasional other things. Rock still wrestling
Right.
occasionally, but
Yeah.
and Jericho still on national TV every week, even though no one wants him.
Right, exactly. But still, he's still doing stuff. It's amazing. It is amazing that they're still out there. In 2001, this is considered one of the greatest WrestleManias of all time. WrestleMania, they called it WrestleMania X7 for some reason. Well, let's start with the main event. Stone Cold defeated The Rock. And if you see that, it's like, okay, whatever. No, this is the Stone Cold heel turn where Vince McMahon comes out and they just obliterate The Rock until he wins because it was a no disqualification match. And it's like Stone Cold shaking hands and working with Vince McMahon. Oh my God, what is happening? That was like, that defined the 90s, that defined the Attitude Era was Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, and now they're teaming up, and I hated the Stone Cold heel turn. I hated him being heel.
Me too.
It just didn't work, and he regrets it now, but it's like I get it, but wow, that was a shocker.
Well, to David's point a little bit earlier, right? I mean, that was where the bounce back into the bigger stadiums because that was at the Astrodome. Or no, maybe it's the Astros new.
It was at Houston. It was at the Astrodome. It was 67,000 people.
Yes,
it was the Astrodome.
Yeah,
it was the Astrodome.
Yep. So big success commercially. I mean, everything, and that was WrestleMania where I think that was the first time where they actually had a couple matches on Sunday Night Heat or something like that. So you could watch
as
that
the buy-in.
As the buy-in. Yeah, so because they basically got to create Sunday Night Heat because they had no idea with all these WCW guys that they just bought, where to put them, So now, we have Sunday Night Heat to go along with Raw and the Rock's show. So
SmackDown.
Thank you.
Also on that was another Edge and Christian versus Dudley Boys versus the Hardy Boys tables, ladders, chairs match. Just so good. And then we get to 2002 WrestleMania X8. Come on, what are we doing with these numbers, people? WrestleMania X8.
Joe, it's an old man. It's an old man, Vince, thinking, "Hey, X is a cool thing. We had Degeneration X, so we'll just name everything X because we're cool and hip."
That's where Elon Musk got his idea to rename Twitter.
There we go.
And now the main event was Triple H against Chris Jericho for the undisputed WWF Championship, but really the match was The Rock versus Hollywood Hogan. At the time, now remember, WCW died, and they had that invasion angle. They didn't bring everybody over because everybody still had their contracts and stuff. So you didn't see the big players, but now they're here. Hollywood Hulk Hogan is back in WWF, and he's the bad guy, the head of the NWO, and he's going against The Rock, who's the good guy in Toronto. And almost immediately everybody falls in love with Hulk Hogan, and they on the fly say, okay, we got to change this up. We got to okay, you're clearly the good guy here, Hogan. Rock was happy. He's like, okay, I'll be the bad guy. And it was such a great match because of the crowd. And that's what you got to love about wrestling. Not planned, and the crowd basically changed the match.
It did. Yeah. And an iconic, I have it as number 4 in my all-time favorite WrestleMania because it was just it was huge. side notes on. I know Jazz defeated. I forget who Jazz defeated, but that was the first time that the women's title match, I think, then came after that, and then you had Triple H for the main fight. But that was the first time they really put the women up in
Jazz against Trish Stratus and Lita.
Thank you, against Trish Stratus. Which now, as we know, the women's event at times recently has been sometimes bigger than the men's. And it's such a centerpiece of what the WWE's right now, what the women do. So a lot of came out of that, but Hogan in that one. Steve Austin went against Scott Hall, underrated match in that I think in that WrestleMania, a very good match between Scott Hall and Steve Austin was a good one too. So that was a great WrestleMania.
It was two guys who could think on their feet with Hogan and Rock, who could make that on their, first of all, two guys who were big enough that they knew if they made the decision to make changes, they weren't going to have Vince yelling at them immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. And not to mention, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
If the same thing happened to two other guys, you have Vince scream, what was it? 1 year
he just came down to the ring and started yelling at people.
or 1 year Kevin Owens had a match at Mania and Vince wasn't happy, and you see Kevin Owens walk and he's looking at Vince and said, "Hey, how'd it go?" And he was like, Vince just no, didn't like it, no, and just shook his head and just looked depressed. And he wouldn't do that to either Rock or Hogan because Hogan was the main, he was still mainstream. And Rock was just getting to be mainstream. In movies.
Yeah. And then I underlined that too on that pay-per-view because you talk about the Undertaker streak. I mean, I think one of the crown jewels of that streak, he beats Ric Flair, who probably passed his prime a little bit, but he was still Ric Flair, David. So you're talking about The Rock. Ric Flair is still in his prime, and so you kind of thought, is this the end of the streak? Is he really going to put Undertaker over Flair? Would Flair really do that and become part of the Undertaker streak? And, you have the Undertaker defeat Flair, which was unforeseen by some. So a lot of people thought the streak might have ended that one. So that was a great match. Really one of the better cards from top to bottom for WrestleMania was WrestleMania 18.
Yeah. The rest of for the next few years, I mean, you had the emergence of Brock Lesnar. Triple H was huge then. John Cena started to come into John Cena was in the his first main event in 2006. What's that?
One thing I do want to mention, I thought I double checked the next year. What was it? 19 was the botch from Lesnar. He was trying the shooting star press.
And he landed on his head.
He landed on his head. And any normal man would have been paralyzed.
Probably.
But because Brock Lesnar is Brock Lesnar.
Yep.
But that was a shooting star press that he tried off the top rope onto Kurt. And head, neck,
main event of WrestleMania for the WWE Championship.
I mean, legitimately two of the best people with amateur wrestling backgrounds ever who were in WWE. I mean, Kurt, as we all know, we're in Pittsburgh. He won an Olympic gold medal with
a broken freaking neck.
Okay. But legitimately one of the best amateur wrestlers ever. And same thing with Brock. Half the time with Brock, I think he got bored at stuff.
So we were at the last event at Steel City Con. No, it was the first one that Sergeant Slaughter was at, and he did the Q&A after. Somebody there asked him, "What's the most amazing thing you saw from the gorilla position, from behind?" So that week, when those two were getting that match rehearsed, they got a little pissy with each other, and Kurt Angle said, "Let's do it for real, our style, our way." And so they had this legendary match. There's no film of it or anything, but those two went at it freestyle
just a shoot match. No running into the ropes or anything like that.
No.
Just a shoot amateur wrestling match.
Talked about how everybody just kind of came out and we're all sitting up on the ramp. People are just sitting down Indian style watching these guys, and it was just the most incredible thing that most any of them ever had seen in their life.
I'll bet.
Yep.
Bet that had to be amazing.
Oh, I mean, and I follow that pretty religiously, Joe. You probably see me post a lot about collegiate wrestling and, Penn State, obviously, and so on and so forth. But I mean, when he was in college, I mean, Brock Lesnar was just a god. I mean, it was, and Kurt Angle was too. But I mean, Brock Lesnar, at David's point, I to this day have never seen a guy that, when he came out, it looked like, how are you going to beat him? I mean, we're talking legit now, contested wrestling, and he was just so, and I remember that day when he did that move, the maneuver off that top rope. I thought first I thought he's dead, and then he wasn't. But I mean,
it's amazing. It was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing. He didn't. Yeah. Most other people they'd have snapped their neck and been dead.
Yeah.
2004 was the Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship.
Yep.
And then we get to 2008, WrestleMania 24, Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair in a retirement match, and as a wrestling match, it wasn't that great, but as an angle and for the emotions, oh my goodness, it was just a wonderful thing, and you could totally see Shawn Michaels being, having Ric Flair as an idol, and him saying, "I'm sorry, I love you," and then knocking him out with a super kick. That was just amazing.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
and and Ric Flair retired, and we never heard from him again. And he rode off in the sunset and never wrestled again. Yeah,
Nope.
I wish that would have been the perfect end, but no, we got
that Hulk Hoganitis, and it's. I think when I will say this about Ric Flair, and I love Ric Flair. I think when you see him do his interviews, he's the most genuine, honest. Like the stories that he tells, it just, she said, you're like, yeah, he's not making that up. That happened that way. The 10,000 women or whatever ridiculous number it was. The pain, you watch him, the famous one that ESPN did, the 30 for 30, and he starts just crying when he talked about how bad of a husband and father he was. I mean, he wears real on his face better than most women wear makeup. I think that's why everyone's been endeared to him for years. I mean, you're right, David. He was past his prime, but even like the Undertaker, he gave you everything.
Oh yeah.
And
that was the perfect retirement match. It really was.
Yeah. He was, whatever they paid him, it was worth it. I mean, he was incredible. And I go back, and I've talked to Joe about this before, and there's another guy, Joe, and I follow. I'm good friends with him. We do football games together on Friday nights. Sometimes we broadcast games for high school football. And we talk about how living up in northwestern PA, when we live up here, it's a little more spacious here, right? We don't have the city on top of us. We could turn our aerials and get like the NWA or Mid-South Wrestling, and so I remember watching Flair back in the days with the big amber vision glasses, and my shoes cost more than your house. And I mean, just, the
80s Ric Flair was just the absolute best. My goodness. Yeah. With that hair, that big poofy hair, and everything he wore, that was like, he was like the inventor of bling, basically.
Yep. And I thought at first, like when it came out with Evolution, it's him, Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton. And I'm thinking, he's going to be the one that's kind of oddball out. And then here he is outperforming probably, or performing along with them. I mean, obviously outperformed Dave Batista, but he's right there with Randy Orton, who was like 25 at the time, and Triple H is in his early 30s or late 20s at the time. He's performing right along with him, and he's sitting there in his 40s. So, I mean, what do you say about Ric Flair?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Remember the Royal Rumble where he came in and he lasted the whole time?
92.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And like
bell
that
to
was
bell.
You talk about being so real. I talked about earlier about Ventura talking about the Savage Steamboat match. And Gorilla Monsoon says to Bobby Heenan, I got to give it to you, Brain, because he didn't hide under the mat. He fought every guy in that ring. He didn't back down. He just lasted that whole time. And
With a
yeah, I mean,
tear in my eye.
right.
That because it was very briefly, Flair was the man in NWA in the 80s, and then whatever the hell was going on with WCW or whatever the hell was going on, so he left and he came and he arrived with his NWA title. Remember, it's
Yes.
like, I'm the real world
You're
champion.
trying to blur it out.
And for some reason, the main event was never Hogan versus Flair, which would have been the most amazing thing ever. They did house shows, and I went to one of those house shows in Pittsburgh, and I was such a huge Ric Flair fan. And Hogan defeated him, and it was me and a couple other friends, and we just looked like a family member died. We just everybody was cheering. Everybody, Hulk Hogan was doing this thing, and then he actually looked at me. And it's like, dude, why aren't you cheering? Like I look like I look like a family member just died. I was just so sad, and he was like, what's wrong with you? So, yeah, that it was a shame that he didn't stay in WWF for longer. He went back to WCW after that, but. Yeah, Hogan, Flair, everything.
I think my point is too, like you're talking, we're in the WrestleMania 24, and he's still helping to carry this WrestleMania tradition we're talking about tonight, all the way into the mid 2000s, right? Into the 2000 teens. I mean, like, not many other guys can say they did that for that long, and be able to come from one organization, still main event, or either put a marquee match together in these WrestleManias. So. Just an incredible part of WrestleMania.
And then in between 2009 and 2012, you basically had Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, and Triple H just going all out. It was either Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker or Triple H versus Undertaker. And at this point, it's like, we got to stop the streak. And those were so good matches. There were so many of them. There was a Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as the guest referee. There was a no holds barred match between Triple H and Undertaker. There was a streak versus career match for Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker. It was,
and of course, that's the last we saw Shawn Michaels ever wrestle. I don't remember anything happening anywhere in the desert anywhere where Shawn Michaels happened to wrestle one time. That never happened.
That never happened.
That was the real retirement match.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah.
Just amazing. They put on some amazing matches. And then also at this point, now this is 2013 WrestleMania 29. You have John Cena versus The Rock. John Cena is basically the man at this point, and they had basically they headlined 2 WrestleManias, right? They had they had
the year before, and then they said next year we're going to run it back, and it's going to be us again. And they announced a year in advance what the WrestleMania match was going to be.
Right? Yeah. Immediately they said we're running it back. Like, wow.
Yep.
And then WrestleMania 30 in 2014, Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker. The Undertaker has a perfect 21-0 record, and Brock is the one to shut it down. Now, if you're gonna have somebody stop a streak, I would have Brock is believable, but kind of would have been cool if they kept the streak going.
I always that's one I've always had a hard time getting over with. I think they should have just kept it as it was.
Yeah. And also Brock I don't think needed it.
I don't think he needed it. I don't think he really deserved it, because I maybe I'm a hypocrite, because I get it, right? You watch Dark Side of the Ring, and all those years where they were going 14 days on, 4 days off, 318 days on the road, ended up probably killing those guys. I mean, literally, they died for it, right? Yeah. And McMahon owned you. That organization ran you into the ground. And the thing I've had trouble with guys in the last couple of years is just Brock would, he'd be somewhat there. Sometimes wouldn't be there for weeks. Then he'd come back. And then you have the same thing going on right now with Roman Reigns. It's like a part-time champion to me, where we were talking about this whole time, guys. We're talking about Savage coming out every week, or Hogan coming out every week, or Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels or Austin, The Rock. I mean, Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, they're putting the title on the line constantly, consistently. And I just guess for me, I know he's more than a part-timer, but if you would have lost to Shawn Michaels along the way, or Triple H or Flair or something, I would have been more acceptable to me than losing to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. But remember, 30, even though it may be known for the, Taker ending the streak, it was the culmination of the Yes movement.
Yeah.
The Daniel Bryan thing was one of the greatest things that ever happened because it was never supposed to. No way they were going to push this little dude. And basically, if
Punk wouldn't have walked out, if Punk wouldn't have walked out earlier that year,
right?
Yeah, CM Punk blew up. He said, "I don't want to do this, blah 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 blah, whatever," because it was supposed to be Punk for the title, but they're like, okay. And they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't want Bryan Danielson.
Oh God, no. Oh God, no.
They were forced into, they wanted that Batista Randy Orton.
Exactly.
That was the year we booed. Well, not we, but Pittsburgh booed Rey Mysterio.
Yeah.
Rey came out number 30 at the Rumble.
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh. And people booed Rey Mysterio.
The 2014 Royal Rumble was, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. It was like literally the fans created Daniel Bryan and pushed him, and they had no choice but to put him. So that was the main event. Was Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton versus Batista in a triple threat match for the WWE title, and they basically shoehorned Daniel Bryan in there.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. That was
a guy too, guys. We're talking about the things we love and we don't like. I mean, I thought he was great in the, the Galaxy movies, but Dave Bautista's never been a guy I've been able to just ever really embrace. I mean, it seemed like Vince always tried to kind of shove him down our throat and the beast and, and all this. And, I mean, yeah, he was an impressive specimen, but to me, just didn't have the acumen, ring acumen or anything. He's probably one of my least favorite wrestlers of all time. I never bought into Dave Batista. I've never really gotten it. And I think that was part of that whole reminiscence where Vince McMahon loves the giant, massively built guy. And that's why I think people even gravitated towards Daniel Bryan a little more, right? They're over that. They were over that like they were over Hogan. They were like, okay, so I was never the biggest Dave Batista fan. Still not. Great, fun actor. He's great in Guardians of the Galaxy.
As an actor, he is the best wrestler turned actor.
Probably, arguably, yeah.
Yeah, because he actually went out of his way to learn acting.
I hate just about every single one of the Rock's movies. They all look the same to me, except for the other guys. That was good, but he was only in that.
I like the first one. I thought William Scott helped make him very good in that one. That they paired off each other pretty well. But yeah, they're not. Yeah, they've not been great.
Another thing is starting in 2007 WrestleMania, you basically had giant stadiums, 80,000 to Ford Field, the Citrus Bowl, Reliance Stadium in Houston, Arizona. They had a big Georgia Dome, Sun Life Stadium in Miami, MetLife in New Jersey. So they're, at this point going forward, it's just huge stadiums. WrestleMania is, just enormous. WrestleMania 31 in 2015 was the Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. Now wait a minute.
It was the steal of the century.
Yeah, it was Lesnar versus Reigns, and then Seth Rollins comes in because this is at the time they were trying so hard to push Roman Reigns down our throats.
Yes,
and it was so annoying. And Brock Lesnar was the man at the time, and Brock won, and then Seth, but they're all like all destroyed.
Joe, remember that was mid-match. Seth came down mid-match and made it a 3-way.
Okay, because it's listed here as Lesnar versus Reigns versus Seth Rollins in a triple threat match for the title.
Yep. It was in the middle of the match. I think they were both kind of beat down. Seth's music hits. The crowd goes nuts because they're like, oh my God, it's not going to be Roman or Brock.
Right. Yeah.
It's not going to be Roman and Brock. This is the greatest thing. This is the greatest cash in ever at WrestleMania in the
That's
middle of the
perfect.
event.
It's perfect. The money in the bank thing was one of the greatest gimmicks they ever came up with. And this is the perfect use of that.
Oh,
That was just
ever,
perfect.
ever. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. And I think that's been the thing that's I'm actually looking forward to this WrestleMania more than I have recently because they built it up so well with all this stuff with the Rock. Rock is the final boss now, and you carrying over the other 2 weeks ago they carried a thing where he's beating the piss out of Cody outside in the bus and dropping the F-bomb and they're not bleeping it out. You know,
in the rain, the whole
in
thing.
the rain, so real. And I finally feel like there's a culmination here, maybe finally an end of Roman Reigns. Now, on a side note, it could be because Roman's sick, and none of us, I don't think, wish that on anybody. And I would hopefully feel like if that is true, he does overcome whatever it is, because he certainly has his place in WWE history. But that's been the weird part about it, guys, because I feel like with Hogan they got it, like they didn't get it, when we ran through WrestleMania 10, and then they were like, okay, yeah, this was a bad idea, and then they kind of got it. I always felt like if Savage was a little bit more loyal, it could have been a passing a torch to him, but that just, and I love Randy Savage so much, we can make a whole podcast about Randy Savage, but they finally saw the light and went, okay, let's go with the Attitude Era, let's go with Shawn Michaels, let's go these different directions. Diesel didn't work out, okay, we'll make Undertaker champion, that went pretty well, but this Roman Reigns and thing that's just been, oh, I love the glasses.
Dream rises to the top. See, I really got to work on my Macho Man.
Yep.
Yeah,
you ever see the bio on him and Lanny Poffo? Like, literally, they filmed it 3 weeks before Lanny Poffo died, Leaping Lanny Poffo. And he said it was Christmas, like in 1983 or 84, and he comes home and he's talking that gruff, because Randy didn't used to talk like that. He's like, yeah, brother, and he said, I never heard him talk in his regular voice for the rest of my life. Like, even at Christmas, he's there like, oh, yeah, look at a little pair of boots. So it's going to be great. Yeah, right there. Yeah.
I think that's pretty good. I think he did a rap song about hating Hulk Hogan or something.
He did. Yes.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, Wilson is hard. WrestleMania 32 2016, the big thing about that was the triple threat women's WWE championship. And this is the last time that they did WrestleMania on one night. Thank goodness, because that thing went no.
Because the first year they did 2 nights was the first year, it was in 21.
Okay, yeah.
And the only reason they did that was they could sell half the seats and space people out, because we were still in the middle of the lockdown-ish period of the pandemic. And they said, okay, we don't want to have 60,000 people shoved together in one area.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're going to do, we're going to have 30,000 people in a 60,000 seat arena, and we're going to try space people out.
I'm sorry. I was thinking of 2019 WrestleMania 35.
Yeah.
That was Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch.
Yeah.
And that was the main event. And that was in New Jersey. And that thing didn't start until like 12:15 in the morning. And
that was also the major issue, transit. Because the train shut down at midnight. It was
too late.
Yeah, the train shut down at midnight, and I'm sorry, they knew around how long it was going to go. They either could have worked with, the Port Authority in New Jersey and New York and had things kept open, or something, because there were people stuck trying to get Ubers.
Right.
From, and really... Yep. The Netherlands, there's nothing around. It's that part of New Jersey. There's nothing there.
It's Tony Soprano. That's it.
I mean, literally, there ain't nothing there. You ain't get nowhere from nowhere. You can't walk. There's nothing else going on at 1 a.m.
Yeah. And then that was 82,000 people trying to figure out how to get home. Yeah, that was crazy. And then WrestleMania 36 was the COVID one. That was That was craziness. That was the Undertaker versus AJ Styles in a Boneyard match.
Mhm.
That was
And
entertaining.
that no, let's say the cinematic matches were great. That was
Yeah.
the first two-nighter.
Yeah, that was the first two.
And that was the John Cena Bray Wyatt cinematic match.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, Funhouse or whatever that was called. Oh my God.
Where all of a sudden Cena's like, oh, now we're going to make you part of the NWO, and now we're going to do the, and that was all Bray Wyatt.
That was amazing.
And,
that was absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was the year Drew McIntyre won.
Drew McIntyre beat Brock Lesnar in the WWE Performance Center is where they had
the PC.
Now this was like a month after COVID hit.
Yeah.
And the thing about Vince McMahon is I don't care if it's 9/11. I don't care if there's a Gulf War. I don't care if it's a global pandemic. We're putting on wrestling, bro.
Yeah.
You know, WWE was the first live thing after 9/11.
Yeah.
That dude did not stop making money for nothing. Yeah. So yeah, a month.
The flip side of that too is how, you know, you can say all the bad things you want, and it sounds like they're possibly true. I mean, especially Ronda Rousey lately is really taking some shots at him in her round of interviews promoting her new book. But you're right, Joe. But I mean, there was, and I have a very good friend of mine who, like, you know, Vince would send a lot of those guys over to Operation Freedom or Operation whatever after 9/11, and, like, you know, they spent a lot of time there and they just adored him. I remember Lex Luger and Yokozuna on the battleship, and right. And I mean, you know, just it was great. And he's,
you know, who tried to lift Yokozuna?
It was tags,
it was
right?
a challenge. Yeah, I was gonna say Peter Taglialetti.
Peter Taglialetti, the Penguins.
They had everybody come in the Yokozuna challenge. Like, can you lift Yokozuna?
Yes.
And poor Peter Taglialetti is like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Well, and don't forget Yokozuna, also known as Uncle Rodney.
Yes. Yep, Uncle Rodney.
Member of the Inoue family.
Yes. Yep.
So he's actually related to Roman
Samoan.
Reigns. And, oh my goodness.
Yes. Yeah, he was Samoan all the way through. And I thought, you know, when they did the Taker, they did the final thing when Undertaker finally retired, and they asked him point blank who was the most toughest athlete you ever faced. And he said it was Yokozuna. He said he'd never seen anybody move that fast, that size. And Yokozuna is just another guy. We can sit here and start talking about the downfalls of
such a shame. He basically ate his way out of wrestling. He ate his way out of life. I mean, he died very early because he just got bigger and bigger and bigger. That's such a shame. But I've heard that from a lot of people. It's like he was like in his prime, he was moving like crazy, giant guy who could move like that. He was unstoppable. But that's name.
Yeah, Bret Hart talked about how, like, in the rehearsal of the matches, he had to adjust his time. Like, I can't believe this guy can move this quick. It's just, you know, I had to sit back for a little bit and talk to him. But yeah, both of you, great points on the COVID WrestleMania, because you watch that like, okay, how is this going to be? And it was pretty good.
They pulled it off. Yeah,
they pulled it off. It's on national news the next day. You know, because like to your point, David, here we are, or you point there, Joe. First live event after 9/11. It went great. I feel people felt a little safe again through professional wrestling. And yet here we are with COVID, and we're worried, we're scared, and here's Vince, like you said, and these guys are still doing it. Found a way.
2021 was a return to live events, sort of. They had 25,000 in Raymond James Stadium, and I'm sure it was one of those things where people were spaced out or something like that.
They tried. I would say this. They tried to space it out, but in reality, once people were in, they all...
Do you remember that was a rain delay or something like that, wasn't there?
Yes.
Samoa Joe in the thunderstorm in a stupid raincoat.
Yeah.
And people were... And then we go... People are like, oh, yeah, look at funny Joe. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, he's like, oh, yeah, he's, you know, champ.
Champ.
In the other organization being a badass that we all
Right,
know Samoa
right.
Joe should be.
Right. But the thing about that was now night one of that WrestleMania 37, the main event was Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair for the WWE SmackDown Women's Championship. Basically, two African American women headlining a WrestleMania main event. That is so cool.
And I would say that's probably in my mind one of the top two greatest women's matches I've ever seen. She was incredible.
It was amazing.
Both of them were incredible.
But the other cool thing about that was at the beginning of the match, Bianca Belair just starts breaking down like
oh yeah,
like, look at where we are. You know, it's that Paul Rudd meme. It's like, look at it. Who would have thought? Who would you think we'd be here? Not me. You know, it's like like Sasha had to like calm her down. It's like, yeah, this is cool, but we kind of have to wrestle a match.
We have a match.
And then 2022, that was in Arlington, and that was the full. One night was almost 78,000. Another night was a little over 78,000. The first main event was Kevin Owens versus Stone Cold in a no holds bar match. Stone Cold is back. That was amazing. Great angle. It was perfect.
I mean, it was that whole thing was just a great card for both nights.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, I think that's you're right, because I think when they started switching to the two nights, it was like, okay, most of the matches are good, but a lot of these matches we could probably watch this on Raw. I've seen better on Raw. I've seen better Backlash or whatever you might say it. But the last couple of years, they've pretty much nailed it with both nights. Like, you sit there and you're like, I'll wait till Sunday, and you're sitting like, oh crap, I'm glad I didn't miss Saturday, because you would have missed this match or that. So they've wisely marketed that, I think, and it's this weekend should be the same thing coming up.
Now, that year was also the year of the one comedy match, which I think was a great comedy match. Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn with the giant hand match. With the giant hand, the mousetrap that almost didn't work.
Right?
It almost didn't work, and they had to think on the fly.
That could have been terrible. That could have gone wrong so many ways.
It should have been horrible.
It was perfect. Sami Zayn is such an underrated performer. He was perfect for that. All of the jackass things were done perfectly. It was amazing. It was like, it's everything you want from an entertaining match. It was perfect. Yeah, that was awesome.
Kind of that tradition of that Ringling Barnum Bailey angle, right? Like going back to Little Beaver and Hillbilly Jim versus Kid Tokyo and King Kong Bundy.
Right.
Looks kind of could be dumb and ends up being kind of entertaining and not a bad match. And
we'll also say it's Sami Zayn too, where has Sami really had any in the last couple of years anything that's off?
No, he's been awesome in everything. He's been awesome. His angle with the bloodline was amazing. I think he just made that. I think that was supposed to be a joke, and he just turned that into an amazing angle.
It was supposed to last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
1-2 weeks, that's it. And then you have one of the great moments where I don't care where Jay goes, I don't care what the tribal chief thinks. And then you get the crowd goes, ooh, and Roman just looks up. He's like, no, he's just not feeling very oozy right now. And they both look at him like, you said what?
That was the thing. They would crack each other up all the time. Like there would be times when they would just start, they just could not, they would just break and just start laughing like crazy. That was just amazing.
Yeah, if we're talking about the gimmicks, I think we skipped over a little bit of one back in 2017 when they had the gimmick battle royal.
And Iron Sheik.
When the Iron Sheik, and they realized the Iron Sheik couldn't get eliminated, or he probably would break his back and literally be paralyzed twice. So we gotta let the Sheik win.
You gotta let him win.
You gotta let the Sheik win.
What was the line that the King had? He's coming down the ramp and he says something like, "Yeah, I think ARP is gonna hit him before he gets to the ring or whatever." I mean, that was such a classic. You had the Iron Sheik in there. You had Nikolai. You had the Goon. And to me, that's what the WWE can be made fun of for bringing guys like that into it. But they embrace the stupidity sometimes. Like they literally brought the goon of all characters. Here's this idiot's guy drops the gloves. He has ice skate wrestling boots, and he gets the living crap knocked out of him. But they brought him back for a gimmick battle royal. I mean, it's just, you gotta love how they think with these things. Going up to like what you're saying now, Sami Zayn. I mean, they've always embraced that very well over the decades.
Yep.
And don't forget, also in 38 was when Cody debuted.
Yes.
Was that the debut of Cody?
That was the debut of Cody, because Seth was going to have a
Seth
mystery.
Rollins.
He was going to have a mystery opponent, and Seth came out. Lights go down. You hear "tung tung." Wrestling has more than one royal family, and then you had the Cody Vader as he rises up.
I love Cody so much, and in 2023, when he did not win, I was so angry that I stopped watching WWE, because I'm still angry about that.
Remember Mark Madden taking that out on you and me on Twitter? Because you and I posted that on Twitter, and Mark Madden's like, "F that for F's sakes, who gives a damn?" Because you and I, like, literally, like, jinx, like, we said it, we tweeted at the exact same time, we're done.
I used to be a huge AEW fan, and now I really couldn't care less about them. And I'm guessing it's part of it is because they got rid of Cody, and I don't know. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the heck. I don't like it anymore. But it's probably, I love Cody so much, and when he didn't win, that just really.
Because there was a guy, we talk about all these guys, and I mean, they really know what to do with them, right? Stardust, back in the day, and you had DiBiase's son, and that kind of took off. Then it kind of got flame, and then didn't work for whatever reason, and he just didn't come back. And you kind of thought you were maybe then seeing this new generation, right, with Cody Rhodes and DiBiase, and then they go away. Stardust didn't work out. It was really kind of corny. He didn't perform well, and he just didn't like the way he's used. Goes to AEW, transforms himself. You're right, Joe. Probably the reason to watch AEW, and now he's back, and the storyline has been so good, Joe. So much fun. I honestly, it's been more fun maybe the last thing I can remember in the last 8 or 9 years.
I don't know if it was planned, whether they were going to push Cody out of the main event, or if that was the plan all along. But when it looked like it was just going to be The Rock versus Roman Reigns, I think we all lost our minds. Like, are you kidding? You're pushing him out. You're pushing Cody back. The entire point of this entire year was finish the story. You're not letting him finish the story. So I don't know whether he shoehorned his way in, kind of like Daniel Bryan, or if that was a plan all along. Well, I don't know.
I think Brock Rock shoehorned his way in, because legit, Rock is on the board of TKO, the owner.
He kind of owns the company now.
So he's kind of a big boss. When he's made the final boss, he's legitimately a final boss.
Yeah.
But the big difference this year, no Vince.
Yeah, that's Vince. I had that written down. I love you for saying that. I had it written down. You talk about all these things we've talked about, starting with Mr. T and Paul Orndorff and all the way up through. This is the first one where there's no real influence from Triple H or Vince.
Triple H is still.
This is Triple H. This is 100%.
This is all Triple H. But no more Vince.
Yeah, no Vince. Yeah. But no Vince. Vince is persona non grata.
And Vince so dominated he was like the ultimate micromanager. He was just dominating
everything.
Every match, every angle, everything, and it was just he really went downhill. Probably like in the last 10 years, it was just some really pathetic things going on.
Yeah, you hate to say it, but Vince is almost 80.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When he hit his peak, he was in his 40s and 50s, let's say.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
Even in the 90s, he was still, 50. He was still young-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. If you get someone in your mid-70s trying to micromanage something like WrestleMania, and not just WrestleMania, the entire thing, even though WWF or WWE, giant corporation, tons of employees, international, they had NXT UK going, at regular NXT. They thought about expanding out even further, all the house shows. Vince was involved with everything. Even though Vince was legitimately like, what do you mean you get tired and sick? That doesn't happen. You're a weakling. How dare you sneeze in my presence? That was legitimately everything you read. That was him. You know, after a while, when you get in your 70s, you can't think as quick. It's natural. Also, you lose touch of what's part of culture. You can't expect a 70-year-old to get what 20s and 30s and 40s get.
Yeah. Which is, I think it's very evident what you're saying, like with Batista, right? Like, no, we'll push Batista.
Yeah.
He's not really the guy, Vince. You know, but
he's got a good look.
The one thing that pisses me off was, let's not forget who won the one woman's battle royal. Santina Morella.
Yes.
At a WrestleMania. Santino in drag.
Oh, that's right.
Won.
Oh, yeah.
And you know that's a Vince thing.
Right.
That's 100%. And people would say, Vince, it's not funny. It may have gotten over in humor in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
It's the mid 2010s. It's like early 2010s.
That was wrong for so many reasons. Yeah.
Yes.
It's not funny. It's offensive as heck.
You're pushing down your female talent.
Exactly. You're sending down an entire division. Yeah.
So it was time for Vince to retire years ago.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, it was. I mean, and there's things that I think were questionable what he did earlier on. Like, I mean, Steamboat in WrestleMania 3, right? So he beat Savage. He's the next thing, and maybe could be carrying on to be the next contender in the world heavyweight title. But he just has a baby. He says, "Hey, I want to spend more time with my kid. Bye. We'll have the Honky Tonk Man beat you." And there's a guy we haven't even talked about all night, and a guy that was so great at being hateable, if that's a word. The Honky Tonk Man, and just
the Honky Tonk Man was not going to put on a 5-star match in Toyota Tokyo Fukudome or whatever, but the dude was entertaining as hell, and like you said, he was very punchable. You wanted him to lose so bad. It's like, oh man,
when the WrestleMania 3 was over, I think it was Easter or something close to it. My dad got me a Ricky the Dragon Steamboat headband. So. Yeah, and I had that in the figure, and I'm like, I am a Steamboat fan for the rest of my life, and boom, he's gone. So what am I doing? Like 5 months later, I'm trying to twist the arrow, and then he would have some of the most incredible matches with Ric Flair and AWA.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, David, because he would make those shrewd decisions, and you know what? Sometimes it seemed shrewd, and it ended up working. He had an eye for that. He had an ear for it. Whatever you want to say.
He created The Undertaker, one of the greatest gimmicks of all time, but he also created Giant Gonzalez. So, and Duke the Dumpster Drosy,
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, we can say Vince as a creative mind was great. There were hits and misses. He had more hits than misses. But as time goes on, you're going to lose touch. And you wonder, how much has he kept? Do you remember the Stooges?
Right.
Ederson and Briscoe, right? The Stooge.
Yeah.
How much did he really have Stooges around him that weren't willing to say, no, this is a bad idea?
Right. Exactly.
When you get that high up, and you lose your feedback, you lose touch.
You know who was a big person that said no? Pat Patterson, one of those Stooges. And when he passed away, I think that, and that was like, I don't know, about like 5 years ago or something like that. I think that's when Vince really started to go downhill, because then he had nobody that would say no to him.
Yeah.
Right. Dusty Rhodes struggled with him a little bit on talent and development and what he thinks this guy would do, that guy would do. And you're right. There's a good correlation between that and how that worked out with some guys and didn't work out with others. So, I had that written down. Like I said, the no McMahon real influence at all.
Yeah.
Going into this, which is, and The Rock. The other thing you got to think about The Rock, no matter what he's doing or what he's playing, I always did feel like he has always had a vision in this business. He's done all this stuff, movie actor, everything. And bad movies, good movies, whatever. But I feel safe with him running the show going forward, because I think he gets it. You know, he can he stepped right in there. So I'm going to be this final boss character. I'm going to be a bad guy again. Oh, we don't know. It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Right.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I think of all the years of the trash talking he did, and maybe Flair only did it better. And just, I think he just gets an audience. He gets a feel, and he knows how to run with it. And he has helped to turn this storyline to one of the better ones over the last decade, maybe 20 years.
Yeah.
You know,
I really hope they keep Triple H hands-on for the day-to-day, though. Because
right. I think he's
one thing Triple H has done, starting in NXT and going to now, are these long-term storylines.
Well, that was I think one of the biggest things with Vince is there were no long stories. That's the thing.
What I'm saying.
He would change his mind every 5 minutes. Sometimes, you know, over and over again. And that's what they were saying about those pandemic shows, not just, you know, the pandemic WrestleMania, but they would do, you know, Raw and stuff. And that was the worst thing, because that would give him hours and hours. He would just change his mind constantly. It was just so exhausting to deal with. You know, in a live show, you have 3 hours and that's it. But now you have like 10 hours, and he was just constantly changing things. It was just insane.
I remember Slaughter in that same Q&A session was asked, who's the greatest you've ever seen backstage with talent? He said it's The Rock. He cut the guy off. He said, I have never seen Vince back down to a wrestler, because he would break character so much, and you never knew what he would do. And Vince would be like, I don't like that. Well, yeah, it worked. Okay, I like it. And he brought up the one time, I think Triple H and him had to be teammates for one reason. And he goes into the locker room and they're filming it. And Slaughter says it was not supposed to go this way. But he says Triple H has got his thing going. And The Rock goes, why are you so angry? Why? I was like, you know, like, I mean, that was totally unscripted. And he said it took everything for Hunter Hearst to not crack up to do it. He's trying so hard. And Vince told him, if you crack up again filming, it's going to start finding you $1 million every time you. So they get it right like the third time. But Vince just looks at The Rock like, that wasn't it. And The Rock's like, that's what the fans want. And Vince is like, you know what? I think you're right. And it's just, So that's going back to
needed.
Yeah.
You needed that feedback. Yeah.
He knows how to read an audience better than anybody.
All right. Well, this was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how this WrestleMania goes. I think it looks very promising. Stop having them in Philadelphia. That, you know,
well,
there's other cities in Pennsylvania, just saying.
And we could hold
Heinz
Field. Size-wise, Heinz Field is big enough.
Let's do it.
It's big enough. However, the one thing I'm curious on, I think Cody will finish the story this year.
Oh, he better.
I do. No, I do. I do, because I think they understand. First of all, I think Roman does want time off.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, he's fought leukemia twice. He's got smallish kids. Cody is your guy who's going out there and he's staying late. And he's signing all the autograph and taking all the pictures. You know, he wants to do that. Roman would never want to do that, but I want to see a couple things. I want to see, just to see Hall of Fame Friday night. I want to hear Paul Heyman's speech.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be good.
Okay. Also, it's going to sound bad. I want Dom to pin Ray in their match, because I want the Philly crowd reaction when Dom comes out as a victor.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you figure right now the man can't even speak when he's on TV. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to have, you know, the winner, and we all know Philly's crazy. Okay. Make sure the jail's
You gotta
open.
hand it.
Make sure the jail's open.
You gotta hand it to the Philly wrestling crowds. They are exceptional. I'll give them that.
It's crazy. It's going to be crazy.
Terrible city, but great wrestling crowd. All right, guys. Hey, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
All right. I'll see you.